we've said one of our requirements then is now that we have a greeting object that I can output a greeting based on a language and whether it's formal or not, I'd like to actually be able to use it. One way would to be simply use the greeting or formal greeting methods on the object and manually update my web application, for example. But I'd like to add a bit of jQuery support to make it easier for any developers using this. They could just give it a selector, and the selector would then be used to create a jQuery object, and then we fill the text of that element. Now let's try it. I've added a bit of HTML to our index.html just so we can use jQuery. I have this login div, and inside of it I have a select with the ID of language, and it's English and Spanish options, where the value is those EN and ESs that are standard and we're using inside our greeter object. Then I have a button called login. We're imagining that this is some kind of login page, and a spot where I'd like to drop my greeting after the login, and I gave it an ID so I can find it with jQuery called greeting. So when I update this, I just have a little drop down and a login button. And I still have my app.js code where I have my chainable methods. I greeted, then I changed the language, and I greeted again, but formal. I could even set the log, because I want to log this, and it used that. So all of that is working. Now I'd like to add a method that accepts a jQuery selector and then updates whatever the selector is. So I challenge you to try doing that if you're familiar with jQuery. If you're not, you just come along for the ride. But if you're familiar with jQuery, I challenge you to make a method on the prototype that accepts a selector and whether or not it's a formal greeting, and then uses jQuery to update the value. And the selector will probably be # greeting, because that's what I'm going to pass. But it should accept any selector, any string, create a jQuery object from it, and update the text inside this here, update the HTML. You can go ahead and give that a try. As a clue, we're going to need to put it inside this prototype object literal declaration. All right, here we go. I'm going to do HTML greeting. That's what I call it. You can call it whatever you want. It's a function. It takes a selector for jQuery and whether or not it's formal. I'm going to make sure that I have jQuery. So if jQuery isn't around, then maybe I'll throw an error or something like that. jQuery not loaded. And there might be other errors that would happen if jQuery wasn't loaded, but just to be sure. And if I don't have a selector, I'm going to throw my own error, missing jQuery selector, or something like that. And then I'm going to do a same little bit of code. I could refactor this into a separate function, but we'll just show it here so it's clear. So I'm just saying, depending on whether you give me a formal parameter or not, that's the string that I'll use. And now I'm going to use jQuery, because remember, I passed jQuery down into the function, although it is available globally, so I didn't have to, but I'm encapsulating this just in case someday someone decides to use something that's an alternative to jQuery. They want to pass a different variable here. I don't care as long as it works the same as jQuery. So I can use my $, that's whatever was passed to me that represents jQuery or something like it, and I'll just pass the selector, because this function takes a string. So I'm just going to pass it down into my jQuery object, and I'll set the HTML to this greeting. And let's make this chainable. All right, so I have a jQuery method that accepts a selector, a jQuery selector, and whether or not it's a formal greeting, and sets up the greeting itself. and then updates whatever value is there. Now I need to do a little bit more validation of what the results of the selector are, but that could be for another day. And then I'm making it chainable. All right, so we have a complete little mini framework / library. Let's use it.